Well, if your definition of spring weather is warmer temperatures, you're going to get it for the most part this week, with the exception of maybe a minor interruption with the backdoor cold front. Otherwise, weather conditions in most of the eastern United States are going to be on the quiet side. There'll be a new storm system coming into the west, and things will remain quiet for the work week, but might get busy again as we head toward next weekend. So that pretty much encapsulates everything that we'll be talking about tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast by doing your Amazon shopping via our referral link, which is pinned to the top of the chat board, or it's on the descriptor to this podcast. We can run fewer commercials or run no commercials at all during the show itself. If you shop on this using this Amazon referral link, doesn't cost you a dime, and Amazon sends us some coin out of their pocket for sending you there. And it's a very, very easy way to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Oh, so anyway, the clock. I did something today that I don't think I've ever done before, and that because my truck is I have a 2019. So I know on the newer vehicles, because everything's connected to the internet, the clock will change by itself. So I manually changed the clock today, which is something that I have never done. Usually I don't do it for about 2 months.
It fooled me today that I didn't. I mean, I had the clocks set forward, but the fact that it was so bright out at 5:30 and 6 o'clock kind of threw me off. I said, "Oh, it's," and of course, naturally, you want to get some new weather data, and now you realize that, I got to wait another hour for it to come in. Now that we're on daylight saving time.
These are first world problems. They're not third world problems, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, we're at the point in our lives where we really do not want to be inconvenienced. We just don't have time to waste. So on that note, so you've got this big eclipse thing this week, okay? So you're worried about this backdoor cold front that's going to come through probably on early Wednesday. Right. Maybe with
Obviously, a
maybe with a
hope.
little luck, you won't have to deal with much in the way of cloud cover.
Well, the front comes through, late Tuesday night, passes to our south, kind of subsides for a while, and then starts lifting back up to the north. I want it to lift back up to the north because my feelings are, Joe, that if it stays just south of us, we're going to end up with some cloud cover and maybe even a little light precipitation, especially Wednesday night into early Thursday. So we want to get that out of here. So the
But
only way
you need it Thursday night to be clear.
Thursday night late into Friday morning. Yeah. So my assumption is that the warm front or the backdoor front will stop and then transition back to a warm front, and hopefully it will push back north and allow for a bit of improvement in the weather for the eclipse night on Thursday night.
And they had a little wildfire in eastern Long Island yesterday. When I looked at some of the pictures and videos that people took, it looked like, a huge blaze. Uh, but apparent, and I haven't been really following it. But my what I've seen today, it looks like the fire is out, and it took out about 2 square miles of pine barrens, which is about 1,200 or so acres. So it wasn't, it doesn't appear that it was it's not a monumental thing, but we are at the time of year where you get situations where the air is bone dry, and of course, you've been dealing with what seems to be endless wind in the Northeast,
It's been
which is
incredible,
not
hasn't
good.
it? This has got to be one of the windiest winters and early springs I could remember in a long, long time.
Yeah, yeah. And particularly because it is March, and March does tend to be one of the windier months anyway, because, typically in March you start seeing these huge storms that have pressures down to like, Cat 1 or even Category 2 hurricanes in terms of the pressure readings, and the gradients get, very tight. Atmosphere is in a lot of turbulence, but for the most part, at least through next Saturday, I think we're going to have to wait. Aside from, if something happens with that backdoor front, it would be very minor in precip. But uh, Other than that, I mean, we're probably going to have to wait for until a week from today before we get into any kind of substantial, any type of substantial rainfall.
The front that's coming in for next Sunday probably will set the stage for some heavy showery rains and also maybe a couple of embedded thunderstorms. I know it's a week away, but it has that look to it. But
Yes.
until then, it's going to be basically very blah as far as the weather. And again, my only concern in terms of precipitation is that warm fronts, especially at this time of the year, we get an easterly wind coming in from offshore at this time of the year. That usually is conducive to producing low clouds, patchy areas of fog, mist, drizzle, and that's what I think may happen here Wednesday night into at least the first part of Thursday. And again, then one would have to hope that the warm front or the transition to a warm front lifts to the north and allows for some drying for later Thursday and Thursday night.
Meanwhile, today, kind of cloudy-ish here in the 50s, but without any sun, it kind of feels, has that kind of sort of, coolish feel to it. Wasn't I wouldn't call it damp, but we do have some rain across the Gulf states. That's about the only place where we're really seeing some action today. And up in the Pacific Northwest, um, for much of the country this week, it's going to be dry, but the exception will be the West. We've got a new storm coming into California, and late this week, looks like it's going to turn into a pretty intense, another one of these intense storms that's going to run up well to our west, up into the plains and western lakes. So late week, it looks like we could have another round of severe weather across the Mississippi, lower and maybe even the middle Mississippi Valley, the Gulf states, the lower Ohio Valley, possibly the southeast going into next weekend.
Yes, we'll see. The weather has changed, on a daily basis. So the what was interpreted, and this is what I've been saying, about going too far long range. Even over the past few days, over 3-4 days, things have changed so much. It looked like, for example, for the eclipse toward the end of last week, it looked like for the eclipse we'd have high pressure situated right over us, no problems weather-wise. Then all of a sudden things sped up a bit. Now that high looks like it's going to be over us not on Thursday but on Wednesday and pushing on offshore. And then the question is, do we get a warm front through here? Is there a wave that develops on that front to our south later on in the week, which may help to cause cloud cover or precipitation? All of these things are cropping up literally at the last minute. Well, not really at the last minute, but within just over a span of 2 or 3 days. So many changes have gone on in the overall pattern or the way that we're perceiving the overall pattern of weather. So we'll see. We'll see how things pan out between now and this time next week.
Welcome to everybody tonight on the chat board. Hopefully you all had a great weekend and you set your clocks ahead and your bodies are not too out of whack because of it, like myself. And welcome to those of you who are watching in the background on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. When there's a big storm around, we might add an occasional Friday or Saturday, in which case we'll let you know. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And of course, if you do like the show, whether you are on this chat board or not, hit that little like button. Joe's got the bell ready. He's ready to gong it,
I'm
right?
not gonging it now. I'm not gonging it now.
No, nor should you be.
Yes,
So, all
yes.
right, let's check out watches and warnings. Really, there's not a whole lot going on here tonight. It was much busier last week, but right now we're in this sort of state of calm. The southeast, southernmost Georgia and the Florida Panhandle under flash flood watches, and there's actually a string of flash flood warnings that are going on with some patchy areas of rain and thunderstorms in the Gulf states. I don't happen to be in that rain, just the clouds. The rain has been mostly to the south. We have red flag warnings up across Nebraska, northeastern Kansas, western Missouri, and southern Iowa, as well as most of South Dakota into eastern Montana. And they've got high wind watches up there as well. And the first winter storm watches are up in California, in the Sierra Nevadas, and in parts of Northern California because of a storm system. All the energy really is coming in into the west. We've got a, the whole setup is basically trough in the west and flattish ridge in the east. But the storminess coming into the west is that's the main flow off the very busy Pacific. And as I said earlier, we're probably going to see a fairly intense storm late in the week and next weekend heading up into the northern plains. But right now, pretty quiet. See the lightning strikes going on in southern Georgia, southeastern Alabama, and in the Florida Panhandle. And there's a nice little looking curl here, a little upper air system moving along in the flow. And another one of these systems that once again, the was it GFS on one run last week tried to show this coming up, and it was it. I'm starting to lump them together. Did not. Yeah, this I think early on, the one of the model runs was trying to show this coming up, and it just wasn't going to happen. This is another one of these systems, Joe, is just going to slide straight to the east. And it's kind of unfortunate, really, in the sense that forget about the snow for a moment, but if we could have gotten at least a solid rainmaker to move up the coast, because the drought is still there. It hasn't gone away. And we're getting the stretches of in between storm systems has been seem to be getting longer and longer right now. So we really could have used to get use some of this moisture to have it move up the coast, but that's just not going to happen in the pattern we're in.
Well, it looks like we'll miss out on that. Again, the next chance for anything really significant probably will not be until this time next week with a sharp cold front. But you're right, and that's a fairly substantial storm system that's going to be rolling off of the southeastern coastline. And no, people say, well, it's too bad it couldn't come up the coast. Maybe we could have gotten some snow out of it. Well, the only way we could have gotten snow out of that system would be if it were really intense and somehow manufactured its own cold air, because there's really no cold air to work with or for the storm system to turn into snow. At least not with that system. But it's a moot point. It's missing us. It's going to the south, and like I said, for the most part, a quiet week here.
You did have less wind today, right?
Excuse me?
You did have less wind today.
Yeah, it was not. It wasn't certainly anything like what we've had in recent days, but the winds were still a little bit busy, still breezy, and it'll be a little breezy at times overnight tonight, um, and tomorrow again maybe some gusty winds at times in the afternoon.
Brandon Doherty hits the tip jar. Thank you, Brandon. And I don't, he asked this question, Joe. Is an anafront similar to a warm front? I've never heard the term anafront. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I have no idea what that is. I mean, we probably know what it is. It's just maybe we call it something else. I have no idea what an anafront is. Um, so there you go. Really lovely weather today from the southern from southern New England southward into the mid-Atlantic. Some high clouds up into North Carolina. It was nice and sunny all the way, and still is because sunset's happening now. The further west you go, you got a little more time. I mean, you can see the sunset line on the satellite loop. But skies were nice and sunny across the Ohio Valley and most of the Great Lakes and in the central and southern plains and uh, back through much of the southwest. A little bit of moisture coming into the northwest, which is where we see some precipitation there on the radar in Washington state and offshore. Meanwhile, in the southeast, the green boxes are all flash flood warnings. You see them there on the Florida Panhandle, and you can see areas of scattered convection across the southern half of Georgia. I actually have some rain aloft here based on what the radar is showing. This batch in from Arkansas, southern Arkansas into northern Mississippi and northern Alabama seems to be sliding to the northeast. Also, some light precip in light rain in South Carolina, heavier down in coastal Georgia and in the Florida Panhandle. Now, the Storm Prediction Center is back doing things in the long range, which we'll get to in a second. Tonight, it's a marginal risk. Southeast Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, southern Georgia, into all the way down into central Florida, but not quite down to Orlando. Now, there's no severe risk again until we get to Friday, which is day 6 on the long range. And we just saw what happened last week when SPC put something in the long range, and it did happen. It did come to pass. And once again, SPC has a uh, implied slight risk in the lower and middle Mississippi Valley for Friday into Saturday. And then as we go into Saturday into Sunday, which is day 7, it moves eastward into Mississippi, southeast Louisiana, Alabama, western Georgia, and nosing on up into Tennessee. And as we know, Joe, if SPC is showing it in the long range, it must mean that there's something to this.
That's the one. That's the front that I've been speaking of for next week, next Sunday, that may provide us with a bout of showery rains and even some embedded thunderstorms. So that's still a week away. But the fact that they're getting braver now. They never, the last few years they would put something up for, let's say, day 4 or maybe day 5. They rarely would ever go beyond that. They would always say predictability too low or probability too low. But now, in recent days, they're really showing something by saying, okay, let's go for day 6. Let's put something up for day 7. And so, as we saw last week, they were very successful with that, as Joe mentioned, and we may very well again see some activity next weekend in the southeast and maybe even along the Atlantic seaboard for next Sunday.
Okay, now they're saying catafronts. I've never heard of these things. You got to ask somebody under the age of 30 because we didn't get this sort of stuff when we went to school, right?
I never heard of it.
All right, so Jason Fox says catafront and anafront. Just give me cold, warm, and occluded, or and stationary. Let's add stationary.
This is from AI Overview. I did the Google search, and it says that an anafront is a weather front where warm air rises over a cold air mass. Well, it's overrunning, isn't that?
Yeah,
So warm air rises over a cold air mass, causing clouds and precipitation to form behind the front. Now, usually, when you have a warm front, as you get overrunning, the clouds and precipitation fall ahead of the front. But this, according to this, is anafront is clouds and precipitation forming behind the front, and anafronts can be associated with significant weather changes and heavy precipitation.
I mean, are we
This,
talking about almost sounds to be like a front with a developing wave on it?
in a way, you're right, but
That's what
all
that sounds like to me.
right,
I mean,
well,
why do they have to, Jason Fox, you're right. Why do they have to make things more overcomplicate things? Warm fronts, cold fronts, occluded fronts, stationary fronts. That's all that you really need to know. I mean, if there's something going on with a front that starts to buckle and you get, you have a stationary boundary that buckles with a wave on it, then just call it that. And you got a front with a wave on it. Why do you have to come up with why do they have to come up with all this extra
because
needless labeling?
because we are in a society now where we need to brand everything. And if there aren't enough brands, make up a brand. And so now we have Vanna fronts and Kata fronts and all this sort of.
And what's a catafront? I've had a front.
That's
That's a
where
whole.
that's where Kata fronts are supposedly where a front sinks. I mean, where cold air sinks. Well, we know cold air sinks.
Yeah, exactly. So what? Oh my God, this needs to stop. But Quiet John, Joe, has banged the tip jar, and and generously so. Thank you, Quiet John.
Quiet John has been quiet lately.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah.
That's but that's who he is.
Yes.
He's quiet. Um, there are some people that should be quiet though, but aren't. But that's a whole nother
I know
conversation
two
for
of them are
another
not
day.
on the two of them are not on the chat board tonight, so they are quiet.
Well, that's right, exactly.
You
And
make it.
the WPC folks now, until until we get to late Sunday, because this actually is valid. This is valid through Sunday evening. So what you see in the east, and you notice the sharp line there the eastern, much of New England doesn't show much precip, and all of this that we're seeing in the Northeast is not until next Sunday. So the week is quiet, barring any last minute surprise. But even if we do get some precip with that backdoor cold front, it's probably going to not amount to much. Meanwhile, it is bullish for precipitation in the central and southern Appalachians, in the Ohio and Tennessee Valley and the Gulf states, into the southeast, where we have a fairly large area of 1.5 to 2.5 inches plus in some areas, and in the west, where we've got these weather systems coming in now on a regular basis. So that's good news for California because they basically spent half the winter bone dry. The rainy season was about 3 months late, but now seeing ample rainfall all the way down into the Baja Peninsula of 1.5 inches plus up the coast, and then it really picks up when you get from San Francisco northward to several inches or more, and also several inches of melted liquid in the Sierra Nevadas, which when you unmelt it, of course, we're talking snow. And again, busy in the west usually means not so busy here in the east. So check
And
out.
let me just point out also on the QPF map here in the New York metropolitan area, you see anywhere from a quarter of an inch from central Long Island, and then as you head west, you get up to a half, and beyond to New York City to the west, in portions of north central New Jersey, you get an inch. All of that precipitation, or most of that precipitation, is is loaded for next week. All of this week, Monday through Friday, and even Saturday as well, hardly anything is going to fall. Take note of the fact that on the map it says this is the 168-hour day 1 to 7 QPF, which ends or is through 0Z Monday, March 17th. That corresponds to 8 p.m. Sunday of next week. As I said, much of what you see there is probably aiming for next Sunday to occur. March 17th? Oh my goodness, Joe, a week from tomorrow, it's St. Patrick's Day.
That's right. And a week from Tuesday is St. Joseph's Day,
That's right.
right? A week
Well,
from
St.
Tuesday.
Joseph, not as well known,
No,
but
I'm
St.
sorry. A week from Wednesday. A week from Wednesday.
Right.
I have
Not
my
as well
call.
known as St. Patrick's Day, but St. Joseph didn't have as good a public relations agent as
Well, I
St.
was going
Patrick.
to say, it's all about marketing.
Yes.
It's all about marketing, and he was in the carpenters union, and they tend to be quiet sorts for the most part. By the way, one of those non-quiet people has arrived, just so you know.
Yes, he arrived right after I had said that a
Yeah,
couple of them are not online tonight. So,
yes, the wind has shifted.
yeah.
Uh, uh, all right,
And
so
he's actually telling us take a few days off this week, boys.
lovely. So here's you can see the upper air pattern. The flow from Canada is mostly in Canada. We're primarily dealing with the westerly flow, the trough in the western part of the United States, and you see it on Thursday. You got a fairly deep trough that comes into the west, goes full whole hog negative tilt, and then redevelops into an upper low in southern Colorado and lifts up in full negatively tilted fashion up into Minnesota. So that's going to translate on the surface into a big storm. And in the meanwhile, here in the east, again, it's just pretty much a very, it's not a ridge. There's ridging in the east, but it's not a particularly strong ridge. And then longer term, there's more energy that's coming into the Pacific, and then more ridging in the eastern part of the United States through the long range. So, we're going to be stuck in this pattern for a while. The good news out of it is that there are going to be some pretty warm days ahead of it, and I think you're going to start to see the temperatures bounce tomorrow uh, in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. It may take an extra day in the Southeast just to get the low out of the way, but temperatures are going to bounce higher. And then, little system that moves across southern Canada there. That's going to bring in a backdoor front on Tuesday night. Little high goes to the north. The wind gets onshore-ish. This run of the GFS actually makes a little bit of snow in upstate New York, north of 84, for Wednesday night into early Thursday. Light stuff, but I'm not, I'm not going to lose sleep over this. And then the front, as Joe said, you look at the way the isobars are drawn, Joe. It's a bit hairpinish. on Thursday night. Look at how those isobars are structured Thursday night. That's a little bit of a hairpin there, and sometimes that's when you can get, in a flow like that, you can oftentimes get some low clouds that come in from the east.
It's true, but if you have a wave of low pressure, and of course winds curve counterclockwise and in to a low pressure system, there may be just enough of a curl for the winds to blow over from the northeast. I'd rather see a northeasterly wind as opposed to an east or a southeasterly wind. That brings the whole batch of moisture right inland. At least if there's a northeast wind, it's over land to a degree, and maybe it won't be quite as moist as a direct onshore flow. We'll see. This is what we're up against. For it's either going to be an overcast night Thursday night, which would preclude us from seeing the lunar eclipse, or it will be something along the lines of, and I mentioned this on my Facebook page, the poem "The Highwaymen" by Alfred Noyes, where the moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. In other words, maybe 60 or 80% cloud cover, but at least there'll be breaks at times for you to occasionally get a glimpse of the moon skirting in and out of the clouds. So it's going to be that kind of a setup. We'll know better as we get closer, obviously, in the days to come.
And while all that's going on in the east, you can see all the stuff that's going on in the west with snows down into Arizona. Um, by the way, I saw something yesterday about Flagstaff's like 60 inches below normal as far as snowfall is concerned, or was until this past week, this past last 4 days or so. But more snow from northern Arizona, northwest New Mexico, northward up through Utah, Colorado. There's some rain in there too, so it's probably one of these mountain snow valley rain things. And you see the action also going on to the west. It's a 984-ish low in Nebraska, and of course, just ahead of that, you've got strong southerly winds blowing from Texas all the way up into the Dakotas and into Minnesota. So clearly, this is going to set up into something important. And then it's a 73 low in central Nebraska. I mean, that's low. And then here comes the severe weather risks. You can see the GFS starts to fire up thunderstorms Friday in parts of East Texas and northwest Louisiana and Arkansas. The low makes its way up toward northern Minnesota, and it really goes hog wild on Saturday in Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, even into Alabama, and then gradually that swings eastward. And meanwhile, ahead of all this, of course, we got warmer weather for Monday and Tuesday. I thought maybe Tuesday some warm spots could get close to 70 if the ocean doesn't get in the way. And then you get the back door, which cools things down and creates havoc as far as trying to forecast temperatures. But then once that goes out, flow should actually still stays kind of on shorish on Fridays, but inland areas will probably warm to some extent. But then as this front approaches, there's a deep enough trough here, you're probably going to get so as you said, maybe from late Sunday night into early Monday of next week, we'll get into some showers and thunderstorms with this, and see, well, maybe an inch plus of rain might be nice. And then after that goes by, another storm in the west, and you see it there, 90 something low, that runs up into the lakes, and that takes us to March 20th. So it's a busy, active pattern that you see a lot of times in March with these really strong storms that form because of the huge temperature differentials that develop across the country. But they are obviously taking tracks up toward the lakes at points west, which means that we see in general warmer than normal temperatures on average for the next 10, week to 10 days.
And we'll just see how things work out. But at least we know one thing: these next couple of days, if there was such a thing as spring fever alert, I think the Weather Service would post one because many places are going to see, as you pointed out, Joe, temperatures that are going to climb well up through the 50s, even into the 60s, and maybe a few spots approaching 70 on Tuesday, just out ahead of that cold front, which again looks like will cross through parts of our area either very late on Tuesday or into the hours after midnight on Wednesday, and then a much cooler airflow as we move into Wednesday and probably Thursday as well.
Yeah, I've noticed yesterday because I drove down to Marietta yesterday, so I wasn't too far from Atlanta. A lot of the spring blooming has been going on there, but up here in North Georgia, we are a good 2 to 3 because of the cold weather that we had, the very cold January and the on and off cold that continued in February. The greening of things here is a good 2 to 3 weeks behind.
Yeah. And Frank R. on the chat board saying, well, no blizzard of 88 or superstorm of 93 this March. Sorry, Frank.
Not happening.
It doesn't always work out the way you want.
No, it doesn't. But you know what works out the way we want?
What?
Griller Jeopardy, which I think you
Briller
have.
Jeopardy, and I've got Briller Jeopardy.
You do.
Believe it or not, I'm gonna bring it up right now. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Yes, indeed. Let me just see where it is. Where are you, Scott? Oh, there he is, right there. So, on this Briller Jeopardy, average snowfall for March. Did we do this? I guess not. I don't recognize these cities. So in the month of March, what is the average snowfall? And we'll start with New York City, Central Park. How much snow on average falls in March at Central Park? And of course, we talked about this the other day that the last 5 or 6 Marches have been way below. I mean, we've had in many cases less than an inch fall in March in New York City. I think it was like 2018 was the last year or the last month of March where we had well above normal actually snowfall. Since then, it's been all or nothing at all.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was busy yelling at, typing on the
I
chat
know.
board to yell at Ruben Fairchild. Um, so I'm sorry. We're still doing snowfalls in March?
In March in New York City,
Yeah.
and I can tell you already that we have one winner. Although I'll
I mean,
mention
the
the
average snowfall for New York City in the month of
average,
March?
average
Yeah, it's
snowfall in.
around 5.
And there you go. Where's the bell? There's the bell. There you go. 5. But as I said, Joe, as we pointed out, since 2018, every March since then has been like point 0.5,
Right.
point 0.2, 1. I mean, it's been hardly
And
anything.
the ones
And
before that were 10 and 15 and so on. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
It's another feast or famine month like December.
Yep. How about
Very good.
Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City. Um, I'm gonna. It's either one or two. I'm gonna say one.
Ring the bell again, Joe. You got you got to let some of the people on the chat board get into this game too. All right, how about Philadelphia?
Philadelphia. Well, I'm gonna go with the ones on the chat board that like Vincent Croce and Joseph and Joe Gaffney and David Fuller who say three.
Oh God, where's the bell? 3 in a row, Joe. Have we ever had more than 3 in a row? This might be it. Although,
And
so
I don't think so. I don't think either of us have gotten more than three in a
I'm
row.
gonna. You know what? There's number 4 and number 5. I'm gonna switch them because I think number 5 is going to be the knuckleball or the curveball that you're going to swing and miss on. Rochester, New York.
Oh, Jesus.
There you go.
Uh, hmm. I want to say a double digit month, but a low double digit month. Uh, Croce and Matthias 88s both say 11.
Well,
Melander,
Fancy is 18, and
Mel-
18 is a little bit too much, Rich.
well, okay, so that gives me a hint. Um, Mike Waterhouse Bonsai says 14, so I'm going to say 14.
Both of you missed by ever so much. In fact, you're in snake country with
Okay.
14.
Well, Mrs. Hutch and Chuck Cardillo say 13.
Nope, that's the wrong direction.
Okay, so obviously then the answer is 15.
15. 15. Now, see, the curveball or the knuckleball worked. Tyler Fengus at 15. Now, we'll go back to what originally was number 4, but now it's number 5. Pittsburgh, hometown of Bruno San Martino, I might add.
Uh, six, I'll say 7.
See, this is why I switched
So
to
you basically screwed me out of getting 4 in a row, is
exactly.
what you did, you know?
So,
But I got 4 out of 5, and I think that's the best either of us have ever done.
well, let's wait. It's not necessarily 5, it's 6 because we have a bonus.
Bonus doesn't count in the count. It's
Oh, all
four out
right.
of
Well,
5.
how about Vancouver?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't even know what their normal snowfall is over there. I'm not even going to try to answer that question. I'll let the chat board figure that out.
All right. Well, that being the case, Adam Lowe got it right off the bat, and so did William Huber with one,
One?
one,
All right. Yeah, I had no clue. You
and
know.
Pat BFD one. So a lot of people said one, and there you go.
Okay. All right. I think that pretty much covers it for a Sunday night. Um, I guess so. Joe and I are working on something that's special, and that's all I'm going to say about it now. But soon, if everything works out, it'll be something you folks might like. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And I think we could say goodnight, right?
I think so too. Good night, folks.
All right, folks. Yeah, see you tomorrow night, 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Night, night. Oh, and thanks, by the way, to Quiet John and Brandon Doherty and Ken Musillo. I missed him. Ken Musillo hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you so much for doing that. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Night, night.
Good night, folks.